Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, support the transmission. Best way you can do that is by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack. Choose the annual, you get a discount. Every week or two, we do group Zoom calls with supporters only off the record. I do a weekly analysis of the news. You can donate, purchase a console if you want to chat with me about whatever you like. Do check out all of my awesome affiliates and leave a podcast review if you haven't already. Joining us for the first time on Geopolitics and Empire is Pete Quinones of the Pete Quinones Show. You'll find him over at quinones.substack.com. The link is in the description. Welcome to the podcast, Pete.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It's been quite a while. I think you were on my old TNT radio show a few times, but it's your first time on my podcast, Geopolitics and Empire, and maybe for people who are not aware of you, whatever you want to tell us about yourself and your show and the work that you're doing.
Sure. I host the Pete Quinones Show. I've been going 8 years now. It's my main thing is the podcast. I have the Substack, which you can find at petesubstack.com. All the episodes go up there to subscribers early and ad-free. Shows on all podcatchers. I try to do as many private things on Substack as I can, but I don't have a lot of time to do it. I'm also a founding member of the Old Glory Club, which is a fraternity that has come into existence in the last few years to talk about ways to push forward with the idea of America and what America was, what America should be, what it was at one time, what we lost, and what we're trying to get back. And yeah, that's about it. I work. This is what I do full time, and I'm constantly working.
I'm in that same boat. We're all in this together, Pete. I'm doing this full time for as long as people will allow me to. And before getting to America, it's funny. I was listening to some of your podcasts today. You recently read through Edward Luttwak's coup d'état. He was a recent guest of mine on the podcast, and I notice a lot of your style is, you do interviews, but you also you read through a lot of books. If you want to just tell us a bit about this, your style of podcasting.
Well, yeah, I talk a lot about philosophy. I talk a lot about politics. I talk a lot about history. I started reading books, like full books over multi-episodes a few years ago. And I did it. One of the reasons I did it was I didn't have a lot of time to read books anymore. So it's like, hey, I get a chance to read this. But more than anything, it was just to get the ideas out there of books that people don't read. And I guess, I read stuff like State and Revolution by Lenin, Ted Kaczynski's Manifesto. But really what set me down the path of doing it constantly was reading a book by a gentleman named Harold Saltzman called Race War in High School. And it talks about what busing did to one specific New York City high school in the 1960s, and how it went from a school where people were thriving and getting ready for college to a school where teachers were being raped, people were ODing, kids were ODing in the hallways, and teachers were being set on fire. And when I read through that with numerous guests, that pretty much solidified that I'm always going to be reading something on my show. And right now, I'm 30 episodes into reading 200 Years Together by Alexander Solzhenitsyn with Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson, and we aren't 1/3 of the way through the book yet. So this is going to turn into well over 100 episodes, and it's probably going to be through the rest of the year. So yeah, I like to take on huge tasks and see them through.
It's like a new form of doing audiobooks, and that's so cool with this space. There's so many ways to invent new ways to do things, and America. I guess you mentioned the Old Glory Club, was it? And something I often think about. What have we lost? What's your sort of pulse on where we're at with America today?
Well, we've lost the idea that we were once a people. America right now is just basically an open air strip mall where we're basically an economic zone. We're a place where people come to make money, send money back to wherever they came from. And they don't come here to be Americans. They don't come here like my great grandfather did, who came from Poland and, renounced his citizenship and had to renounce his allegiances to his home country, and then went to work in the coal mines in Western Pennsylvania and raised his family there and is buried there. And all of his kids are buried there. That kind of thing, that's not America anymore. There are parts of America where that still exists where I've chosen to live. But the idea that we're a people, that this country was founded by a certain group of people, and that they invited other people in and grafted them in with the notion that they were going to become like them, that they were going to share their culture, their high culture. Well, that just disappeared 100 years ago. You can even go back 125 years, and that's pretty much been gone. And you see what it's wrought. You see how this country now, like I said, is all about economics, and we barely even manufacture anything anymore. So basically, we're all about financialization. We're about usury. We're about investing in markets. We're about, what do we make? We sent that overseas, and we allow somebody else to make our prescription medication, the chips for our weapons, the very things that we need to survive and to protect ourselves are now controlled by a foreign power. And that's something that Lutwak talks about in Coup d'etat. If you're a country who is not making your own weapons, and you're getting them from someone else, you're a vassal state to whoever you're getting them from. Now, we do still make our own weapons here, but a lot of the chips and a lot of the components come from other places. So are we like, places like, Ukraine, which basically relies completely on Western nations for their defense, and hence basically we can tell that now we can dictate what their politics is? Well, I mean, there are so many foreign interests that are embedded into the United States because of what we've allowed to happen and what we've given up, that, like I said, we are just this commercial zone now. We are not a country anymore. There are pockets of the country that still have that spirit, but for the most part, people don't talk about this as if it's a nation, as if it's a polis anymore. It's just a place to come and make money.
I think your diagnosis, it's accurate, and maybe I've heard something like this before, but yeah, it's a new way of looking at it, and it's so true. When you say people just go there to make money and leave, and I was just thinking about myself. My parents came in the '80s from Croatia, and they've gone back now. They got nothing in the U.S. They've gone back to Croatia. I just by chance and circumstance, I left for Mexico, and that's just the way life takes you. And yeah, there's a lot of people, particularly Croats and those types of ethnic groups. Once they've hit retirement age, they leave. Often, if they're first generation immigrants. And just on the economy, since you brought that up, that's, I guess, what you mentioned is what America has going for it now. But, I'm wondering how much even that has something going for it, because you got the tariffs. I talked to people in the U.S. who are on the ground who are saying it's difficult to find employment. The cost of living is rising globally. How do you assess the economic strength of the U.S.?
Well, unless we start making our own things again, not good. Because right now, the success of the United States basically is contingent upon how strong the dollar and how strong Wall Street is, and how the Treasury operates, how the Federal Reserve operates. Like I said, we are financialized. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't own stocks. Sure, of course. Why wouldn't I? And I know people who feel like I do. They're like, this is a financialized usury is terrible. I know hedge fund managers who feel that way. They want the country to go back to the way it was. Well, why did they pick what they do? So they could make a whole lot of money so that they're not affected in the future by what could potentially happen. So that they could buy hard assets, they could buy land, they could buy gold, they could buy silver, so that they'll always have something of wealth. But we have to basically decide that we're going to make things here again. And I think a lot of that starts locally. I live in a small town, and there's a lot of land around here. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to attract, and there are a lot of people around here who don't have jobs. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to attract factories to come here, companies to come here. And, but as far as the country goes, I don't know if it's salvageable. It's way too big. There's too many people. There's so many people here who don't belong here, who are here illegally, or if they're not here illegally, they're just here for, like we said, just here to make money, and then they're going to send us someplace else or leave eventually. I don't know if it's sustainable as a large polity. I think we're headed towards some kind of Balkanization, de facto or otherwise, and I think that's the only way we get through this. I do not see mass deportations happening. I do not see crime and certain groups that are overwhelmingly overrepresented in violent crime being, on a mass scale, being either controlled or jailed. As a matter of fact, most of them get out of jail. They, a narco tyranny takes over, and the people in charge are like, well, it's better. They're better. It's better off on the street. They can punish the people who are doing well, and then we just continue having this whole cycle of people that we can import in because either the founding stock or the people who are of the spirit of the founding stock are just further, pushed further and further out. So, I think that we have to take a more local approach, but we also have to start getting back to building with our hands and building things with our hands, building things locally, and really building up and strengthening our local areas. So, and I honestly believe that the stronger a local area is, the weaker big cities, which are the enemy of, basically our enemy, they become. We can, by having stronger local areas and more rural areas, the cities lose power because we don't have to rely upon them for anything. We can cut their food supply off if we want. I mean, that's what the area I live in. It probably supplies eggs and milk and everything to most of the country. We could cut people. If we were smart, we could just cut people off. We could, I also have a feeling that we're headed towards localized pockets of violence, but that's another story.
Well, anyway, maybe we can get to that, but just and I want to ask you more about the Balkanization, but just on the tariff thing, like I'm trying to make sense. I listen to smart people who have differing opinions, and I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop because it's, Trump says one thing, then he says another, and then China this and that. And it's not clear. I feel like it's this fog now, and I have no idea what is going on until something concrete happens. And kind of like you allude to, I just find it would be great to rebuild, right? As you say, factories, but can we do it? I don't know. And then this, you mentioned folks in the U.S. illegally who make up a lot of the workforce, but now we've got robotics coming in. There's a danger of AI, software, robots, drones going to replace. We've all seen these videos of at farms they got drones watering, agriculture and stuff like this. So. Any further thought on tariffs, whether we can actually bring back that can induce investment to come back and rebuild plants, and thoughts on robotics, replacing humans?
Well, I'll go with robotics first. I mean, well, you have to ask yourself, if robotics are going to take all the jobs, why are we importing so many people? Is it if everybody's looking towards AI, then we're just importing people from different cultures to punish the the founding stock that are here. Will that happen? I don't know. I don't know how on grand a scale that's going to happen or how fast that's going to happen. I mean, I use AI for research. I mean, that's pretty much what I use it for. I know it can be used for code. I know that one of the big things that people are talking about is using it for coding. Then there is robotics, but I don't know. There are certain things, there are certain problem solving skills that only a human can really deal with. And I think when it comes to manufacturing, a lot of that is going to still have to be human. I don't know. Well, like I said, I tend to think of things on a smaller scale because I don't see the future being national. I see the future being local. What was the other one you mentioned?
No, it was pretty much it. And then when I asked you about the Balkanization, do you think
Yes.
that's going to be something that would happen just culturally or actually politically, like where we have a state secede and they're no longer part of the union? And this is interesting because I learned recently in Mexico, there are states like Nuevo León who want to secede from the Mexican federal republic. You have that in the US. There's talk now of Canada, Alberta. There's also, that plan of North American Union and integration, the Greenland stuff, the Panama stuff. So, what do you mean when you talk about Balkanization and, civil war as well? You've got the US wanting to do airstrikes, basically take the movie Sicario with Benicio del Toro and make it nonfiction.
Great movie.
I enjoyed the film. Honestly, it was very well made, and I think that there was a sequel. I think I saw was also pretty.
It was good too. Deus Soldado, that was good too.
Yeah. But just all of these things. This is a cauldron. It can create so much chaos with what's the fire that's already lit in Mexico and the U.S. And so, what would you see when it comes to Balkanization?
Well, I mean, I just think it's inevitable. I think we're just going to have to deal with the fact that we're going to have to split, that it's going to get to the point where you either split or you have violence. And even if you split, you may have violence. There's a good chance you're going to have violence. At this point, I don't think there's escaping violence. I don't think it's going to be this mass of violence all over the country, but I think it's going to be pockets, and it's probably going to be rural versus urban. But the Balkanization, I think that it's already started. I know a lot of people who have decided to move to certain areas and to gather in certain areas. Some of them did it organically. They didn't even realize that there were other people who had been moving to certain areas just to get away from certain, to get away from certain situations that they have no control over. And I think that it's going to be cultural. I think it's going to be cultural and racial. And it just seems like there's going to be it's natural with what's happened. You've had an open war on white people preached for at least 10 years now. It's been longer than that, but I mean, they've openly said it, talked about it on the nightly news programs, on the Sunday morning programs, that white people need to be handled. And I think that there's only a matter of time. I don't think all white people are going to be like, oh, I'm taking this seriously, but I think enough will take it seriously that they'll be like, okay, we need to collectivize. We need to collectivize for our own protection. And I just don't know how that's avoided at this point. The Trump getting elected, I was hoping that there were some things that he would do a little more about tearing down the administrative state, and maybe he still will, but I'm not hanging my hat on it. I'm hoping that there are some things that Powell's been doing at the Fed, that Besson is doing at the Treasury, that Jamie Dimon has been. I know that they're all working together And they're trying to basically, and they've done a really good job of destroying Europe. I mean, when you look at the euro, what private equity Powell has done at the Fed, getting LIBOR, dismantled, so that London doesn't control our interest, Europe doesn't control our interest rates anymore, and now Chicago, so forth, controls our interest rates. I mean, literally, you would take a loan out on a car in Texas, and London would be the one who would figure out what the interest rate was. Well, I mean, that's just globalization. And Powell gets all the credit for dismantling that. You've also seen, look at the price of the euro to the dollar. Look at the British pound to the dollar. When I was growing up, the British pound, it seemed like, was pegged at $2 to $2 of our dollars to the British pound. I think it's down to $1.25 now, $1.20. I mean, this is basically Powell declaring war on Europe, and Europe is panicking, buying. I mean, look at how much they don't have gold. They can't meet gold demands. Gold has all flooded into New York City, which is why you see gold up at near $3,500 an ounce right now. So there are things that I think that I was hoping that Trump would do that could help. Just give us some breathing room. Give us 4 years so that we could figure out a plan going forward. Because the one thing that I know Trump is not going to do, and the people around him are not going to do, is destroy the left. And if they don't destroy the left is going to get power again at some point. And when they get power, they are going to be mad. And it is going to be like my Time magazine back there, which signifies the beginning of the Spanish Civil War. They are going to be out for blood. And I mean that literally. They are going to look to spill blood when they get power back. So when I look at everything Trump's doing, I have two things in my mind. One, do enough so that we can make more money, acquire more property in the next 4 years, make it easy for us so that we can set something up for the future. And otherwise, I don't think we're going to have mass deportations. I think that we're stuck with this, and we're going to have to make it work. The problem is we're not going to be able to make it work on a grand scale because the left will get power again. And when the left gets power again, they are going to seek to destroy what's left of white America.
I had on recently Pastor Chuck Baldwin, who mentioned this idea of...
He's great. I've had him on the show. He's a good man.
Yeah. He's cool. And he put the thought out that JD Vance might take the helm in 2028. Today I saw Ocasio-Cortez putting out all these videos, going to these rallies, and people saying that's a sign she might run. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth comes out yesterday, talking about how we're done with the woke stuff at the Department of Defense. And so you don't think, and I'd agree with you that, things haven't been dealt with. They're still there, if you peel back the surface level. So, so you don't think we've reached peak wokeism? You think all that stuff is still there?
I mean, even if we do get rid of wokeism in the next 4 years, or if JD Vance is in for another 8 years, one thing that I know about human beings, and especially about Anglos and North America, Northern Europeans, if they get a good 4 years where there's a lot of prosperity, they have a habit of voting in the wrong direction. I mean, look at Sweden. Sweden was, up until 1952, they had a purely free market. They're one of the richest countries in the world. And then they decided, well, we have an ethno state, and we have people here who don't have we have a class that doesn't have as much as everyone else. Well, We need a gigantic welfare state now. And what has that done to them? I mean, it just they did pretty good for a while, but eventually that's going to come crashing down upon itself. And the main reason it came crashing down upon itself is because they got flooded with immigrants from Africa and the Middle East. I mean, when you have a country of 9 million people, and you get 1 million people who are antithetical to your way of life, well, then the Swedish women, in the span of 5 years, redefine what rape is. So I don't trust the average voter to be like, oh, so we've had 4 great years of this, and if there's no obvious person who's going to carry it on, but is going to take it further, it's just a matter of time before the regime that we've had in power for the last 125 years gets back into power. Woke means nothing to me. Woke is just one of the costumes they wear. They are anti-civilizational. They want to destroy civilization. They want to rule the ashes. They have no problem ruling the ashes of civilization. Why would I trust them? Why would I trust anyone other than myself, and trust people that I know that I have a history of being able to rely upon? Never met Donald Trump. Never met J.D. Vance. Never met RFK. Never met Pete Hegseth. Don't know what they actually believe. I saw in a Signal chat they were like celebrating dropping an apartment building full of people just to get one guy who they didn't get, and they're all supposed to be Christians. Okay, well, I'm sorry. I don't trust you. You're not acting very Christian. As a matter of fact, Islam that you're constantly complaining about seems to be a little more civilized than that. I mean, I've seen Israel drop apartment buildings in Lebanon just so they could get one person, and they killed numerous people. And then when Iran retaliated and sent bombs into Israel, sent rockets into Israel that landed, where did they land? At military targets. They didn't bomb civilians, even though Unit 8200 of the Mossad is right in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Tel Aviv. You realize that Mossad uses Tel Aviv residential neighborhood as human shields, right? Oh, I thought only Muslims did that. Oh, okay. No, I don't trust these people. I don't trust them to bring us out of anything. These are not elites. These are not historic elites. These people don't know what noblesse oblige is. So why would I trust them? Why would I think that it is they would think it would be in our best interest to destroy our enemy? They haven't been destroying our enemy. Our enemy is not outside the border. The more crucial enemy is inside the border right now. That's why the founders talked about enemies foreign and domestic. The domestic enemies are much more dangerous than any foreign enemy right now. And they're not doing anything to destroy them. As a matter of fact, they're letting judges stop things that they want to do. Judges that weren't even born in the United States. Which is, I think I read the DC appointed judges, the DC judges, circuit court judges, 60% weren't born in the United States. I mean, that says something about our government, but it also says something about them. When my ancestors came here, I guarantee you, if they would have been offered a judgeship, they'd have been like, no, why would I'm not qualified to do that. I have no ties to you people. I'm here to become one of you. I'm not one of you yet. Why are you going to let me stand in judgment of you? So that tells you that these 60% of judges are evil people who just want to tell other people what to do and to rule over other people. How are we not headed towards violence? And I'm not calling for it. I will never fire the first shot. I will never be the one. I don't believe it's worth it. I don't believe it would do anything. I think all it would do was get people killed. They don't think that way. They're going to fire the first shot. They're going to be they're going to drop the first bomb from the drone.
And you mentioned Sweden, and I just had this thought of this. I want to get just your further definition when it comes to this force that we're discussing. But I know folks in Sweden. You hear about, as you mentioned, migrants and the crazy stuff that goes on there, the stabbings, rapes, and some of the folks I know, they're programmed by this liberal mind. And I'm reading in the papers like all this crazy stuff is going on, and they live in Sweden, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't see any of that." And then I had on Jacob Nordengard, who's just a great Swedish researcher on globalism, and he's saying, "Yeah, we just had these attacks," and so it's kind of like, well, which one is it? And it's the same thing you hear in Mexico. It would be like me in Mexico saying, "Oh, everything's fine, it's all right." It's like, no, I mean, there's like cartels chopping off heads, dissolving bodies in acid. You go to the vacation on Oaxaca, you get the 9 people got dismembered, and they say it was the local municipal police, kidnapping them. And so it's like, yeah, Mexico's a great place, but I'm not going to have a Stockholm Syndrome and say this is not happening. It's insane. And how would you just further describe this dark force? Because the left, I tend to think it's more now this like liberal globalism, and what they represent, as you said, I call net zero, absolute death zero. The trans stuff, it's all a total inversion, anti-human. The type of economy they want, it's a death economy. Would you sort of agree with that? What would you also call them, liberal globalists? I mean, what would you call them?
Well, if you want globalism, if you want everybody to be the same thing, you have to stop people from living historically, right? People who want to live, who want to talk about their ancestors, who want to worship, who not want to worship, but want to honor their ancestors and live as they lived. That's their enemy. That's what they've been destroying for the last 100 years, since World War II. That's what World War II was all about. It was to destroy historic nations of Europe that live that way. Because you're not going to have globalism. You're not going to have, liberalism. Another good book, a good book on liberalism is Ryszard Legutko's The Demon in Democracy, where he talks about how liberalism and communism are just kissing cousins. Liberalism and Marxism are just kissing cousins, because it's like you're constantly working towards this perfection that you never achieve. So instead of sitting back and letting people decide what's best for them and how best they can live historically, what you're doing is you're socially engineering their environment so that they're constantly your goals are their goals. Your needs are their needs. What's important to you is what you want to make important to them. So if somebody isn't interested in wealth, well, if somebody isn't interested in higher education, well, we got to push them towards higher education. If somebody isn't interested in, I don't know, being incredibly literate, I mean, you could just read people like the early propagandists, the Walter Lippmanns, and oh god, I can't remember his name now. It's the one who wrote Propaganda.
Bernays. Right?
Bernays. Yeah. Well, what do they say? Oh yeah, we need a literate society. We need them just literate enough so that we can propagandize them, so that we can tell them what to believe. If you're raising up a people who are completely deracinated from where they came from, where their family came from, who they are, if you have a family that's lived on the same, plot of land for a couple hundred years, and there's a family cemetery there, and you're going to do those people are a danger to you because they don't need you. and they're not buying into your globalist vision. So what do? You basically get into the schools and teach their kids that what's really important is that you move closer to the city. You want to live in a really good zip code. So when it comes time and your parents die, instead of living on that land and passing it to your kids, sell the land. You're going to make a fortune. It's paid off 100 years ago. And if somebody pays you, a couple, $10,000 extra to remove the cemetery stones, who cares about your history? That's what these people are about. They're about destroying who you are. It's not like economics. It's not about politics. It's about destroying who you are, where you come from, who your family was, who your descendants was, literally who you are, the essence of your being. They've been destroying that for 100 years, over 100 years. And that is what the goal is. That is that is why you put 1 million savages in Sweden. So they forget who they are. So they change their culture. So they change their beliefs. And you tell them, if you don't take these people, you're evil. There's something wrong with you. You can't be a part of this global, this club that we're in. And sure, where I live, if there's a shooting around here, there was a shooting, I think, like a month ago or something like that. It was downtown. Yeah, and when I say downtown, I'm talking about a town of 2,400 people. So it was downtown. Everyone was talking about it. There hadn't been a shooting in over 2 years. It was family. It was, of course, something domestic, everything. But, so I don't see what happens in Chicago. I don't see what happens in Camden, New Jersey. I don't see, people stepping in human feces in San Francisco. But I know how that affects the country. I know how that affects everything that we do. I know how eventually everyone's going to have an attitude of despair. I mean, I think most of what we see on like social media and everything now is just demoralization. That's why we see so much negative stuff. They just want us to be demoralized. I mean, sure, I look at it and everything, and I try not to deal with it, but it's my job. My job is to tell people exactly what's wrong and why, why if you're in a very small town, you need to be careful who you hire as a librarian, because you don't know what books are going to end up in your library. It happened here. You don't know who you're hiring at City Hall, because when you go to get a permit to meet at the city park and the person there is telling, and you're going to have like a prayer, you're going to have a bunch of churches come together and you're going to have like a prayer service. You have somebody at City Hall that was just hired, a transplant from the north, who is like, well, you can't do that. There's a separation of church and state. And you're like, fuck you, we can't do that. We're going to do it anyway. I mean, that's what's happening. That's what these people want to control you and want to engineer everything out of you that means anything. And that's what the last 100 years, that's what has happened since World War II. Even before then, but certainly since World War II. Because why would you want to have strong families? Why would you want to have strong churches? Everybody might become a Nazi. So we need to, there was a book that was put out called The Authoritarian Personality. And what they said in that book was, well, if we want to keep people from becoming Nazis again, we have to destroy the family. We have to destroy the churches. We have to introduce the concept of eros to people, which is just basically porn and sensuality. I mean, that's what they've been doing. And people can say, oh, well, that was just a book and they wrote it. Everything in there came true, right? I mean, it was literally one of the biggest committees in the country commissioned that book. And everything in that book they did. That's the war. The war isn't economics. The war isn't, trade. The war is who we are. as a people. If we know who we are as a people and we embrace that, economics will fall into place. Trade will fall into place. But if we're going to be destroyed, if who we are is going to be destroyed, those things are meaningless. They literally don't mean anything if you don't know who you are.
For me, a lot of what you're describing is, again, I think what they're trying to do is this process of globalization and moving from the smaller state structure, nation state, to this, Babylonian Tower of Babel 2.0 multicultural world government. And in order to do that, they've got to mix us up like in a blender to create this, globalized. Because if you have a political world system and an economic, you need also one single culture and religion. I talk about that a lot in the podcast. But yeah, I think that's what's going on. Even here in Mexico, migrants pass through Mexico, and I've witnessed, and these are migrants that speak Spanish. They're Latinos, Guatemala down south, and even Mexicans are not happy with Latino, migrants hanging around, and some are harmless. I've had some of them threaten to kill my father-in-law on the streets of Guadalajara. We were loading stuff into a car, and this young, 30-something-year-old, he's living on the street, I don't know what, and his girlfriend or something pushing their carts, and he tells in front of me and my father-in-law, "What if I just kill you, old man, and take your stuff?" I look at him, and he slowly goes away, and it's just kind of like, it's just a common thing with whatever country you live in to have basic law in order. And I wanted to go back to the Trump administration. As you mentioned, there's obviously disappointment. You have all the things that were said during the campaign, like they're going to deconstruct agencies and things like this. And, I read the headline last week, Kash Patel, FBI. Or we're going to rebuild trust in the FBI. I'm like, what? Kristi Noem of South Dakota, head of DHS, the same DHS that's banned me from PayPal. And she's like, "Don't delay, get your real ID." I'm like, all of the, we had one rhetoric during the campaign. And then once these people are coming into power, it's like, RFK, right? He's got the MMR vaccine thing. I think I saw a video clip of him saying he'd never inject his kids with MMR vaccine. And now he's like saying, "Oh, that's the way to go." Like, what's going on? And, thoughts on that, but also the technocratic element, because you've got, I fear a bit of this technocracy leading to dystopia. So what are your thoughts on that, Elon Musk and other such stuff?
I mean, it's all just a path to the same place. It's all just a path to people who are just robots, people who are just economic units, people who are just walking annuities for banks, for lending institutions. Really, the best way you fight this, and a lot of people don't want to hear this, especially people of conservative and libertarian bent, is the best way to fight this is to get your friends in charge, to get people that I've always said, it's like, if libertarians want a libertarian world, then they should get elected and just by fiat start tearing things apart and tearing it down and threaten people to kill you, because that's what they'll try and do. They'll try and kill you. But at this point, when you look at those things, when you look at like chips in the head, things like that, I have a tendency to believe that they're just distractions away from the very real things that they're doing, which is, destroying the money supply, running debt, importing, infinity Indians into the country, importing infinity Central Americans and South Americans into the country, and letting criminals run loose so that they can, if you, now this isn't my area, but if a criminal breaks into your house or it comes onto your property and you shoot him, you go to jail. You're not allowed to, San Francisco is a narco tyranny. where you allow the worst elements of society, like, they did in San Francisco, where if you stole up to $900 worth of stuff, you wouldn't go to jail. And they knew how to do that. And all that does is demoralize. All that does is destroy. It destroys people's businesses. They don't care, and most of those businesses are white owned. I'm sorry, they just are. Every once in a while, a minority owned business will get, they're just in the way. They're looking to destroy who we are. They're looking to destroy our ability to live. And we can talk about AI. We can talk about, technocracy. We can talk about all this stuff. I've been talking about this Anthony Sutton and Patrick, what the hell is his name? I can't remember his name. Yeah, Patrick Wood. They've been talking about this. They've been writing about this, books about this. Whitney Webb. Oh, Teal, because and you use it. What about the fact that they're just destroying us? What about the fact that they're destroying who we are? It almost seems like it's a smokescreen for us to worry about something in the future while we're being destroyed in an even worse way right now. Sure, no one wants to live in a panopticon, and that's the threat. The threat is, you're going to live in this panopticon. Does it really matter if you're nobody? If you have no family, if you have no sense of your family, if you're not teaching your kids who their grandparents were and who their great grandparents were, does any of this matter? It all just seems to me to be a distraction. And right now, all I care about is getting that back, getting that sense of history back, and helping other people to realize that, helping other people to know, I live in an area where I know a couple families, their families have been here for 150, 200 years. They know where their families are buried. They know where their relatives are buried. They know what they've owned. They know who bought it, who was the one who bought this piece of land. They know who started this business that they took over, that their great-great-grandfather bought. That's all that matters. That's all that matters in this life, is knowing who you are and knowing where you came from and being a human being and, being a Christian. And that's the threat. It's not even the threat. That's what they've taken away from us. They've just continued, and they continue to take away from us. They continue to strip it away. And while we're worrying about this panopticon over here, and we're worried about this thing over here, more and more of it's just being stripped away. And really, if you choose not to participate in that, you can. It's just going to be a choice. It's just going to be planning. It's just going to be making a decision that you're not going to buy into this anymore and that you're going to go in another direction. There are places, this state does not have, they don't even have the money anymore to, like, the DEA doesn't have the money anymore to, try to invade every weed dispensary in Los Angeles in a year. They couldn't do that. They don't have that kind of funding. Every once in a while, they'll make an example out of somebody. Merrick Garland in the Biden administration did a really good job of that, of targeting Catholics anytime he could, praying at abortion clinics, throwing old women in jail for 8 years because they were praying at an abortion clinic. Well, I'm glad that woman is out. I'm glad that she's been pardoned and everything. But that's just to get you scared. It's not going to happen to most people. Most people, if they know what they're doing, can get together with other like-minded people and make plans and do things that mitigates the harm in the future, that mitigates this. I don't want to give up the cities. I grew up in a city. I grew up in New York City. I would still love to go to New York City. I don't really go there anymore because it's sort of frustrating and it's sort of demoralizing. But, I don't think for right now, cities are the greatest place to be. If people want to stay in cities and fight for them, good luck. I'll do as much as I can to help you in any way I can. But, I think for what they're threatening, if it's at all real, then you should be much more worried about what's already been taken from you, what's continually taken from you, and what you've lost, and getting back what you've lost mentally, spiritually, metaphysically, than worried about what could possibly happen. Sure, you're going to think about things that could possibly happen, that could possibly be, could possibly hurt you in the future. But, there was a time when people came together and they formed alliances to mitigate this, to make sure it didn't happen. And that's what should be happening now. But people don't want to do that. They've been trained to think, if I just get the right person elected in Washington, D.C., everything's going to be okay. Oh, what happens when, okay, and say you're happy with who's in there now. What happens when somebody gets elected again who doesn't have your best interest, or you don't like, at least? Where are you at that point? The more important question is, when that person gets elected in the future, who is going to come to seek to destroy you even more, or build that panopticon, or all these things that so many people are, promoting? Where are you going to be at? Where are you going to be at mentally? Where are you going to be at spiritually? Where are you going to be at financially? Where are you going to be at in a collective? Are you going to be with a collective that understands what's coming, understands the issues, understands the historical problem? Or are you going to be alone and, hey, I made a whole bunch of money and I live in the suburbs, and, oh, wait a minute, here comes the, here comes something that's 10 times worse than 2020, the summer of 2020, and, oh, it's coming in my neighborhood. Oh, and if I try to defend myself, I'll go to jail. These are the things to think about. Economics is a distraction. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a libertarian anymore. Economics is a distraction. Economics is just basically, it's like Scientology for 120 IQ white guys.
I was listening to one of your recent it was a half-hour rant on libertarianism, and I found it amusing. And I do, you have a point. I talk often about technocracy, which is a distant threat, although I believe it, it's already encroaching and affecting my life and stuff. I couldn't renew my debit card here in Mexico because I don't have my Mexican voter ID, which is the digital ID for Mexico. So it's beginning to seep in. But what you say, I haven't really touched on that because I spend a lot of time on technocracy, and I've been lamenting that for decades now. Just Vinny Sullivan, I have found his account on Telegram. He's on X. He's an Englishman. Really good stuff. And he just posted a photo of a grandpa with his grandson. And he says, one point indicator of how quickly things have changed compared to even when I was little is that some of today's grandparents now believe that they're babysitting their grandchildren as opposed to spending the much needed time together that both parties once cherished. And I've seen that, and I just, this is what the digital age has done in globalization. When I was a kid, everyone was on the streets. And now I go back to North Chicago, where I grew up, to Croatia, where I grew up. It's empty. It's all empty. Everyone's been atomized. You're seeing that. Mexico is still less worse in the sense that there's still that family connection and extended family that they do get together more often than Americans. But even that, I'm seeing them hit those chinks in the armor. And so, I think that's a strong point. And I'm tied. That's why I always want to go back to, even though I was born in the U.S., I've always identified as Croat. That's my name. That's my blood. And in the future, I'd want to go back there. And for the time being, though, I've assimilated in Mexico. Become a citizen, speak the language, and I've integrated. And I think that's what people, if you end up in a foreign country, that's what you should do. As you were alluding to earlier, I do want to ask. I do want to get your opinion on foreign policy in the world, what's going on in the world. But before that, just any thought on the podcasting space, alternative media? There's all sorts of skullduggery going on there. Just what's your sort of thoughts when it comes to the podcast space?
Honestly, most of what I listen to are people I know. People that I've spent time with. I listen to their podcasts. There are a couple of podcasts that I listen to who are like former intelligence people who keep eyes on like leftist radical groups, things like that. Some foreign policy as well. But for the most part, I try to avoid a lot of podcasts because I don't know who's financing them. I don't know what they're putting out. I mean, there are Twitter accounts where, it's come out that they're financed by certain groups. There's certain individuals, and that if you look at who they're being financed by and you look at what they're promoting, well, I mean, how are they going to promote something different? I mean, the only like real place I've ever heard where you could have your own opinion was like RT. Was like people who actually got hired by RT and they're like, yeah, we don't care. You can talk about, you can crap all over Russia and foreign policy and Putin all you want. That seems to be one of the only places that was legit. I mean, obviously they are also, Russian based and everything. And you have to be able to, there is going to be some propaganda on there you're going to have to sift through, but I mean, you're going to have to do that everywhere. I mean, there are like I said, I pretty much trust the people that I know that I've like met in real life and spent time with. Even if I disagree with them, there are people's podcasts I listen to that I disagree with, but I know them. And it's like, and I want to hear, because every once in a while they make a good point, or I want to hear where they're coming from. I want to hear what somebody who disagrees with me is saying. Maybe I can make my argument. Maybe that can help me hone my argument a little better. But for the most part, the alternative media and everything, I mean, once you give it a name, it's done. I think that, Johnny Rotten said the first time someone said, let's start a punk band, that punk rock was dead. Because, then you're giving it a name. And and he was pretty much right. So, there's the alternative, like the right-wing alternative media is not organic anymore. I mean, places like the Blaze, who are very nice and employ my friend Warren McIntyre. I mean, how do they have so much money? The Daily Wire was financed by the Wilkes brothers, who are billionaire like oil people or something. I mean, they're billionaires. So, and they're also like hyper Zionists. So it's like, I mean, once you start digging in, it's like, okay, well, I see why certain people have the opinions they do. I try to find people who just are really, I mean, I know that this is like almost cliche now, people who are just asking questions. But yeah, I mean, that's what I do, is sometimes I'm just asking questions. I want to know why. I want to know why people think this. I want to know why people are pushing this. I want to know why this exists. I want to know why people, or so many people are so eager to back Israel no matter what it does. But I want to know why. And, and I'm not going to accept the answer because they're our greatest ally, because I've heard that from too many people. And if if I just hear that from over and over again, that sounds like something that is just a trope that somebody picked up. I want to know why. And then Thomas Massey goes on Tucker Carlson and says, well, everyone in Congress has an AIPAC handler. It's like, oh, well, that gives me a better idea of why, this government and so many people. And then when you study, like dispensational theology, you have an idea of why so many evangelicals support Israel unconditionally, even though they could be murdering fellow Christians and they don't care. and they still support them. So, I want to know why. And I like people who ask the question why, or delve into philosophy, or delve into history. I would rather listen to somebody, question the motives of the American Revolution than listen to somebody talk about how, the taxes were raised 2%, so they didn't like. No, that's too easy. That's too easy. Give me something different. Tie it to aliens. Tie it to space aliens. I'll listen to that before I'll listen to, well, they raised the taxes 2%, and then we dumped the tea in the harbor. I don't want to hear that. I don't care. I'd rather hear something way more interesting, like, oh, well, maybe the foundings, maybe a lot of those people who rose up were acting a little more like Antifa than they were like actual freedom fighters. I've heard that before, and I was like, oh, that's a whole lot more interesting than 2% tax was raised, and and the Boston Massacre, and yeah. So that's why the podcasting sphere to me is just like, I do what I do. If people want to listen to it, they can listen to it. If they don't want to listen to it and they're mad at me for things that I say, I can't. Okay, don't listen. I'm not going to beg you to listen, because if somebody's begging you to listen, I mean, what's their motives? My motivation is I'm going to put something out there, something that I think is interesting myself. If you want to come along for the ride, come along for the ride.
I want to get just that further thought. I was going to mention, you mentioned RT. I saw someone, RT producer just followed me, so maybe they want me to come on RT. And, there's that big account, Kanakoa, or however it's pronounced, massive X account. And I think I subscribed to their Substack, and they almost didn't publish anything until today. Out of the blue, I got a email from Kanakoa's Substack saying, buy my X Accelerator course on how to, I'm going to, prove how you can increase your following and everything on X. And I'm thinking that there's no way, because you look at the people that are aligned. It's like that mainstream alternative media section. And many of us, I get people who message me who have different accounts, and I'm shadow banned, I'm suppressed. I'm like, what's the point of even talking? We all are. It's kind of like, tell me something I don't know, and there's no point in wallowing in it. I'm just kind of like, I told someone this yesterday. We're all the soldiers, and just fire away. Just fire away with your mortar. We're all suppressed and shadow banned. There's no use talking about it. That's just how the way it is. But there's no way. I think Kanakoa has probably got some links to the system that allows him to get so big. But for those of us that are in that ask too many questions, we're never going to get
X is nice for, getting news, finding news, interacting with people. I mean, I can't stand X. I mean, I use it basically to do some promotion, things like that. But, also just today, I was going back and forth with Nick Land. That wouldn't happen if it wasn't for X, so, having a little conversation with Nick Land, who lives in China, of all places. So it's like I'm literally having a conversation with one of the top philosophers of the last 25 years on X, and he lives in China. So I mean, once in a while X comes through for me. So I have a good day on X.
No, don't get me wrong. These are all useful tools. For Telegram, X, Substack, whatever. I was able to DM Lutwak, which there was no other way to contact him, and I got a response and get him on the. He gives me his email, and I get him on the podcast, and so and I use it for news source to compile news for my weekly Substack analysis, and so stuff like that. But my point was that it's tough, and I did also want to, and what I don't like, just on your point of people, if they don't like what you're doing, just leave. Like, there's this lady who's pestering me now on Substack, and I had to mute her. I'm like, she continues to ad hominem and insult me, and I'm like really, like, just unsubscribe. Like, really, I got better things to do than argue with someone online. I got kids to hang out, raise, and podcasts to do, and it's just kind of like, if you don't like Geopolitics and Empire, unsubscribe. Please just leave me alone. Stop pestering me. And I don't like
people think that like people think that like we're begging them. I mean, I had a guy who subscribed to my Substack and paid a year in advance, as a subscription. And like 3 or 4 months in, he didn't like the fact that, I was hyperbolically making fun of boomers. And I refunded him everything. I didn't prorate him. I refunded him the whole year subscription, and I blocked him. Just so you don't think it's about the money. It's like, I'm not going to have you in my comments just being a jerk. I mean, I'll put up, if you're going to subscribe, if you're going to support me, I'll put up with a little bit. I'm not going to put up with you just like hammering the comments and everything is negative. And, one of the things I don't really like is if I have when I have a guest on, if you insult the guest, that guest took time out of their day to come on my show. And even if I disagree with everything they say, and even if you disagree with everything they say, that does not give you the right, no matter how much you're subscribing for, to just like openly insult this person. It could be a friend of mine. Believe it or not, I have friends that I don't agree with. I'm friends with people who we disagree on more than we agree on. And I will choose them over a stranger every single day. Because we've sat down and we've broken bread together. And I know that this person would, drive at 3:00 in the morning to come help me if I was broken down somewhere. I don't know you. Thank you for the $8 a month. And it means a lot. I'm not minimizing that at all. But if you think that you're just going to like rip on people who like take time out of their day to come and talk because you disagree with them, and that you can do it anonymously on the internet, sorry. I mean, I'd rather not have the money.
Yeah, and just your further thought, sometimes people assume, they classify me, and they get angry with me. Oh, you're a journalist, so why didn't you ask that question? I'm like, whoa. I'm not. When did I say I was a journalist?
Why don't you call me? If you're going to call me a journalist, you may as well call me a child molester, because I consider those to be in the same class of people.
Prostitutes, as Gerasante says this, but it's like, I'm a podcast. Like, I was a teacher. I just want to talk to interesting people. So I'm a podcaster at most. I just basically record conversations with people. That's it. I'm not a journalist. And then people sort of assume, they want me to be their mailman. They'll say, hey, go to this, renowned figure in alt media. Send them this, write this. I'm like, dude, and I think the point you said earlier, I don't like being affiliated with anyone. I'm just a dude with a mic on my own, doing my thing. And don't ask me to be your mailman, or I'm not on your team. People think you're on their team.
Since we're complaining, here's my favorite. Hey, can you ask this person to unblock me on Twitter? Are we girls in high school? I mean, what the fuck is that? Literally, what the fuck is that? Oh, Jody blocked me on Twitter. Can you ask him why? Can you ask her why?
I mean, it's happened to me. If someone blocked me, I'm like, I laugh at it. Like Lisa Pease, she's some leftist JFK researcher. And I'd even sent her interview request previously. She blocked me because she didn't like a guest that I had. I'm like, okay, cool, Lisa, thanks. But then people that ask you for you post some video or something, they ask you, can you use the source? And they're like, there's memes for this. Like, you've got Google at your finger. You can literally find it yourself. Like, I have guests to find and podcasts to edit to yourself. But just one more point on this before going to the foreign policy. Sure. This disagreement. I don't know how much, this, what you just said, I had on Britt Gillette, who's an evangelical Zionist, there's a portion of his stuff that I agree with, a portion that I don't. I have on then another flavor like Chuck Baldwin, who speaks against Zionism. There's a lot I agree with him on. And then what I don't, I had on Lutwak, who's a Zionist, but he's fascinating. He's got an incredible, you know what I'm saying? And so like, but there's people that can't handle what you're talking about, this disagreement, and they have this very infantile reaction. And then they assume that I agree with every single guest. That's why I bring him on. And it's like, just thought on that for, I don't know if you had the same experience, but lately people are losing their minds because I just happen to have conversations with some people.
Well, I mean, I really think this goes towards the splintering, how people are becoming more partisan on their beliefs. You know, it's like I will have somebody on who, you know, I will go to like my subscriber chat and they'll be like, well, that, you know, I really don't like that person, but, you know, I like Pete, so, you know, I'm going to keep subscribing. It's like, okay, well, who are you? Who was that post for? That post was for yourself. It made you feel better. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I have Daryl, like, you know, I've had Daryl Cooper on, and Daryl Cooper, you know, I think he does really well in researching and reading books that other people don't read and then putting together good podcasts. But, you know, he also has like opinions. He has social opinions that a lot of right wingers don't agree with. And I'll be like, well, you know, I would love to listen to that, but I can't listen to Daryl Cooper. Okay, so who's that comment for? You know, it's like, I mean, I literally think people are just putting comments out there. I mean, and it really is a feminine kind of energy where it's like, these people need to hear my opinion. It's like, start a podcast. I mean, I've told people that. They're like, I can't believe you had that person on. I can't believe you had that person on and you didn't have somebody there to counter their message. Start your own podcast. Okay? I'm going to do things the way I've always done it, the way I want. I treat this like my kingdom. I'm the king of this. I do it however I want. I have on whoever I want. I talk about whoever I want. Audience capture, I do not want audience capture at all. I don't want to succumb to that. I've seen way too many podcasters succumb to audience capture. No, if you like it and you support me, God bless, love you. But if you're just going to whine, and it's like, stop. You don't have to support. I mean, it really is a sign of the times. And it's the anonymity, knowing that they'll never meet me. And, 95% of the comments that are made on social media, people would never say to another person's face. And I also think it's the main character syndrome. It's like, well, I'm watching this show. I'm making this show popular. I'm part of the reason why this show is popular. So I get a say. You don't. Sorry. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, whenever I meet like a listener, 99.9% of the time, they're awesome. We can have a meal together. We can have a drink together. We can have a smoke together. It'd be great. We'll have a great time. But it's like, why do you have to act like that online? It's like, I do that to my enemy. So I'm rude. I will be rude to my enemies online. People that I consider to be my enemies. I'm a certain way. I have certain beliefs. And really, if you are the opposite of me, you are my enemy. That's the way. I'm sorry. That's the way this world has gotten. To go back to some of the things we're talking about, there are only globalists and anti-globalists now. There's no Republicans, no Democrats, no libertarians. You're a globalist or you're an anti-globalist. If you're a globalist, you're my enemy. I will treat you. I will talk. I will say, but I will say that to their face too. If you're coming at me and you're being rude and you're like, well, I'm a listener. I'm assuming you're hate listening. because if I'm rude to my friends, they know that it's a joke, that we're being rude to joke around and just be dudes or something like that. But I just don't get this whole thing about how, it's like, oh, because I'm a listener, I get to say whatever I want and shit on Pete's friends and everything like that. Okay, well, so maybe that's why you're blocked.
We're getting a little bit about, I wasn't planning this, but it's good to air our, my grievances, your grievances, the behind the scenes of the podcasting space. And like you said, I think it's only a irate minority, and the majority of, my listeners love what I'm doing. And they get it, like I assume if you're going to support financially Pete or myself, it's like, you've listened to Geopolitics and Empire, you get what I'm doing. And then that's why you support me. If you don't get it, don't support me. And the thought police, someone on the YouTube comment, I put up Lutwak, and like, you interviewed Lutwak? You interviewed that guy? It's like, well, let's learn from these people. And this is the thing that what I don't understand, just wasting time on this negativity and hating. Like, I will usually, the only comments I make online on whatever social platform is egging people on, like people that I like. I'm like, oh, that was awesome. And I almost never, like, for me, it's a waste of time to go to someone's channel that I hate and then start saying how much they suck. It's like, I'd rather be doing more, positive stuff, that I like doing. And, if I don't like that, I don't even bother with them. All right. I used the example of Shahid Bolson recently. He's Middle Nation. He's got this big channel. He talks on geopolitics. I think he's an American converted to Islam. I'm not Muslim. That's opposed to my Christian worldview. But he says some really fascinating. He's got insights and analysis that makes you think. So there's a couple of
videos that I really enjoyed what he had to say, but for the most part, I disagree with him.
Right, but my point is that I'm able to listen and not be like, oh, Shahid Bolson, freaking out. But let me, since I mentioned Islam and the Middle East, and just your thoughts on foreign policy, the specter of a third world war, Russia, Ukraine, what's going on in the Middle East, the pivot to China. Just what's sort of your 2 cents when it comes to where we're at there?
Well, I mean, I hold the unorthodox opinion on Ukraine that Ukraine started this, but it wasn't really Ukraine. It was NATO. It was Western forces, and NATO. My friend Thomas likes to say NATO doesn't exist anymore. NATO is just an excuse to mess with people that you don't like. And I know that they said that they weren't going to bring NATO up to the Russian border in the 1990s, and that they have. And I know about the coup in Maidan in 2014. I know about them getting rid of a properly elected leader. I know about the FDEU call from Victoria Nuland. I also know the history of Russia, and I know that a lot of the people who in our government that push Russia hate are Jewish, and they have an ethnic animosity to Russia because of some things that happened in Russia, Pale of Settlement kind of things. And I'm actually covering that in a very long series on my channel right now, where a lot of this is just propaganda and lies. And it's ahistorical. And Solzhenitsyn wrote about this. And it's so funny that so many people love to talk about the Gulag Archipelago to crap all over communism. But when it comes to his book, 200 Years Together, they don't want to read that because he actually gives you the history of what happened there. And so there are a bunch of these Ukrainian Jews whose families are Ukrainian Jews in the government, like Victoria Nuland and Robert Kagan. I know Robert Kagan is no longer in the government. Anthony Blinken and all these people who, like, their families were in Pale of Settlement, and they're like, oh, well, the Russians treated us so bad. We need, and our people took over and were, really headed up the Soviets up until, a certain point. And then in the 50s, it was like, well, we don't have as much power over the Soviet Union anymore, so we're going to form the neocons and we're going to be completely anti-Russia. And then in the 90s, when the Soviet Union falls, that changes, and all these oligarchs go in there and they rape the country and basically, drive down the the lifespan of the average Russian male. And then Putin comes in and goes, no, that's not going to happen anymore. No, we're going to clean things up and we're going to get you people out of here. And ever since then, they're trying to kill Putin and they're trying to kill Russia. Sorry, it's an ethnic. This is ethnic animosity that goes back to like 1648 and 1652, when a Cossack named Khmelnytsky crushed a bunch of Jews who had decided that their Messiah was coming back. They're Proto-Sabbateans, and Khmelnytsky put them down because they were murdering Poles and Russians. Okay, I know that history. This is a lot older than the 1990s. This goes back to the 1590s. We're going back 500 years on these things. So that's what I see happening in Ukraine. Hopefully, this can come to an end. We've heard things in the last 24 hours that seem hopeful, and I know that Russia just dropped a bomb in Kiev that. I don't think it hit anything residential. From what I understand, it was targeted. So we'll see what happens with that. Israel, Gaza. I mean, come on, this is 80 years. And people want to go, oh, this is a 3,000 year. No, it's not. No, it's not. They decided that they were going to. Zionism pops up in Russia in the 1850s and in the mid 1800s, and they're talking about how they need a homeland, and they're like, oh, we need to go back to. Oh, but there's people living there. Then you have the lie that a land without a people for a people without a land. Yeah. Well, what about the people who are living there? They go back there, and then for some reason, instead of going back there and just like slaughtering all these people or driving all of them out, they decided, oh, we're going to have our enemy on the doorstep, our enemy, right? We're going to keep our enemy like right next to us. Who does that other than people who just want to be seen as maybe victims, which is historic? So, it's come down to this. October 7th happened. Oh my God, all these horrible things happened on October 7th. I don't care. I'm sorry. I'm anti-Zionist. Deal with it. That war didn't start on October 7th. That war started started over 100 years ago. So, I don't know what's going to happen with that. It looks like there's really no Gaza left. So, it's just a matter of what kind of deal can be made. I have no idea what's happening there. China seems to be a little more important. I mean, they make a lot of the things that we, like, especially the pharmaceutical thing. We're a country that doesn't really care about like homeopathy or health. We just, shove pills down our throats to keep ourselves alive. So, and China makes a lot of those. And, it's like Steve Bannon said in the interview for the book, War for Eternity, said, I was in Harvard Business School in the 1980s. And what they were teaching was that, hey, why are you people like manufacturing stuff here when you can have it manufactured in China for pennies on the dollar, and it'll be even cheaper than just have it shipped back. You'll make a whole lot more money, and you don't have to worry about then they use the whole pollution thing. Oh, we're exporting our pollution, and now China has to deal with that. Well, as Luttwak talks about in Coup d'etat, you have a problem if somebody else is manufacturing your stuff. Is manufacturing your needs. And I don't know how that. I have a tendency to believe from inside things that I've heard from people who are very well connected that by the end of the year, there's going to be something that's going to happen. Something will happen over Taiwan. Probably something at sea will happen. And it's not going to be good.
I've been getting that signal too, just reading the because I read everything, and just reading the pro-Washington Pentagon papers. they keep putting out a high quantity of China's going to take Taiwan, China's going to take Taiwan, which to me is a signal that it seems like Washington either wants China to take, it's like Washington wants to get the party started. And so,
well, I think, I don't think that China is going to take Taiwan. I think it could be something as simple as any exports that leave Taiwan have to go through China first, or anything that's imported into Taiwan has to go through China first. And that'll be enough of a stressor to be an excuse to, have one ship ram another or something like that. I think that's a more likely scenario, and I've actually heard that exact scenario spelled out. So if that happens, if it happens like that, my sources were pretty good. But I think that the China thing is just going to have to be dealt with. I think like looking at like an overview of the world, I really think like a more of a Monroe Doctrine kind of thing, where we worry about our area of the world, the Russia worries about their area of the world, and you start looking at things that way. I think Russia should be an ally of the United States. I think Russia should be an ally of Germany. I don't see any reason why in this world, other than the fact that we're run by globalists who are completely psychotic, that those relationships shouldn't exist. China's a different story. I don't have the answer for China, but manufacturing things at home again would definitely be a start to that. The whole tariff thing, I have a friend who lives in Beijing who, has said that, so many, like, even if you have the tariffs there, so many items and products have been exempted from it that the tariffs don't mean anything. So I think it's a bigger issue than the tariffs. It's going to have to be something on more of a scale of treaties, even if they're not written. But I just don't. I would like to see Zionist influence removed from the United States, and I think then Israel is not our problem anymore. Ukraine isn't our problem anymore, and I really think something that would help us help the world is if Europe just decided that they were going to rise up and be like, we're not going to deal with this globalization anymore. We're not going to deal with this globalism. We're not going to deal with this deracination. We're not going to deal with this invasion of, you've been importing military age men who are rapists and murderers into our country to seemingly punish us and to make us want to leave or to just destroy our way of life. And, I think a lot of it hinges upon what Europe does, because right now I can't say that Europe is an ally of the United States. They seem to be more of an enemy, and it shouldn't be that way. That's where most heritage Americans are from. That's where our blood comes from. That's where our families come from. There's no reason why we shouldn't be friendly, but globalism and World War II did a hell of a job on, we don't even have a West anymore. Calling it the West, from a philosophical standpoint, doesn't really mean anything anymore. It's more, calling it the West is just a designation of a group of nations and lands.
The Western Special Economic Zone.
Much, yeah.
We've covered the Balkanization of America, globalism, Trump, technocracy, alt media podcasting, World War III. We've covered the waterfront. Is there anything else that you think is important to get across? Mention that you're.
Just go back to, we're at the point where it's been preached to us for 100 years that individualism is more important than anything. You're an individual. That's the most important thing. And, to a certain extent, you're going to have, even in the most homogenous societies, you're going to have individualism. You still have a right to private property. You still have a right to own a home. But collectivism is historically what's protected people from their enemies. And, we have enemies within, our enemies are inside the gate. We have enemies that are foreign as well. And the way to fight them, if you're going to have a deracinated people who only think of themselves as an individual economic unit instead of a polis, instead of a people, instead of in a Spenglerian sense, a race, then you're doomed. This is just going to continue, and it's just going to get worse. So, yeah, find your people. Find the people who agree with you, who share your values, and figure out a way to collectivize and become powerful, even if it's only in a spiritual sense. Start there. Start with a spiritual sense of unity with a group of people, and see where you can build that from there.
Yeah, that's what we've got close relationships in our spiritual community here in Mexico. Community, that's the way to go. Well, good getting a download from you, Pete, your update. Again, your links are in the description, but tell us again where we can follow you, your project's best way to support you and all that.
I'm on all podcatchers for now, Apple, Spotify, everything. The Pete Quinones Show, PeteSubstack.com is where you can subscribe, and I put the episodes on there. And the Old Glory Club. Check out if you're in the United States and you're a young man who is looking for people of like mind. Go to the oldgloryclub.com. Check out our Twitter account. We have a lot of fun with that, and try to find some people. We've reached a point now where wherever you are in the United States, an hour or two away, there's going to be people looking to start chapters. So, it's a fraternity, and what I've been talking about as far as collectivization. No better place to start than a fraternity, and you can work from there and figure out what you in your area, what needs to be done in order to protect yourself from globalism.
Well, I wish you the best in the Balkanization process. May the odds ever be in your favor, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.